Hey folks, I think I'm doing this right. If you can see me on here, just like say hello on the chat. If you can see me on Okay, I think we got a delay, but and I don't really know where I'm looking to look for your questions, so I kind of have it up on two screens, guys. But we can get started, I guess. Welcome to I guess test review. Yes, Aiden, you can invite Dahlia. That's fine. She's planning on taking the AP exam, so that's fine. I don't know how to tell how many people are here. 16. Nice. All right. Okay. Shoot, guys. Does Kirby know how to work this? Is Kirby here? All right. Oh, well. Who is Jay Grandmaster? And the dentist was fine. But my teeth are fixed, I think. Okay, well, I think we got to figure it out. I have a chat here, but I'm going to be way delayed, I think, from what y'all are seeing. So it's basically 8 o'clock, and I lost my stuff, my book. Hold on, give me 1 second. All right, shoot, ask your questions. What we can do is, like normal review sessions, I just make a list of things that we want to talk about. So if you want to do that, I'll write it down and we'll just go through them. Technically, I'm a minute early, Halima, so I'm not unprepared. The most important things to know about Chinese empires. So I'm going to start right there, Diane. And the Chinese empires really come into play kind of across our key concepts. So I think it would be best to kind of look at them in a few different phases. The first, I'd start with kind of key concept 3.2, which is innovation of state forms and their interactions. And the Chinese empires are an example of empires that had collapsed at the end of the classical period, and new states formed or emerged at the beginning of the post-classical period. The Chinese empire reconstitutes under the Sui Dynasty. For the Sui Dynasty, the big things to know were its bringing China back together and centralizing authority, bringing back that bureaucracy, but also building the Grand Canal, which connects northern and southern China. That's really the big stuff with them. That fits into key concept 3.1 with trade a great deal as well. The Tang Dynasty, kind of that golden age that we see in China under the Tang and the Song, They reinstitute kind of Confucian-style bureaucracy, Confucian civil service exams. There is a greater influence of Buddhism in that time period in China. And if you recall reading about Empress Wu and the position of women in the Tang Dynasty, that's important as well. There is a backlash against Buddhism during the Tang Dynasty, so they start to kind of push back against that. I think that's important to know. What else is there? Neo-Confucianism develops at the end of that time period and will continue into the Song Dynasty in China. And that is significant. I'm trying to think what else there. Song Dynasty, keep in mind the kind of intense patriarchy that comes into play there. Foot binding would be an example of that patriarchy. What else might you need to know? Song Dynasty kind of is at like the verge of like an industrial revolution almost. They're using kind of having tons of innovations during their time period, so that's important to know. Although pretty much throughout the Song Dynasty, they're dealing with nomadic incursions on their borders, and that of course will culminate with the rise of the Mongols, who will conquer the Song Dynasty. But that's one reason why the Song Dynasty is forced to move from northern China to southern China. So we have those kind of two time periods, northern and southern Song dynasties. Following the fall of the Song, we have the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty in China, and they are followed by the Ming Dynasty. As far as trade goes, we had talked about this a lot in class, I think, but if you look at like key concept 3.1 on Freemanpedia or AP Worldpedia, it gives you a decent idea of Chinese involvement in trade. One way that they supported trade was with the development of the Grand Canal under the Sui Dynasty, later on the development of paper money to encourage trade. The Tang Dynasty had, even earlier than that, had pretty much conquered a great deal of the Silk Road and had spread China or expanded China further west than it had really ever been before. They come into contact with the Abbasids at the Battle of Talas in 751 in that conflict. Under the Song Dynasty and the Ming Dynasty, China will engage more in maritime trade, becoming a part of the Indian Ocean network, being involved in trade in Southeast Asia. The Ming Dynasty will eventually recall their merchants, sailors like Zheng Ha, and they will kind of cut themselves off. But we'll talk about that more in the next time period. I would say off the top of my head, that's what you need to know about China. Let me take a look. I have my key concepts up on my computer, so I'm double checking to make sure there isn't anything major I'm missing that I would feel bad about. I think I've hit the big stuff. All right, let's go to another question. Most important things to take away from the Abbasid and Umayyad caliphates. Well, if we're putting them in chronological order, it's the Umayyads, then the Abbasids. Well, sort of. You have the Islam under Muhammad, and then you have the Rashidun Caliphate, which is the rightly guided ones, the first caliphs following Muhammad. Then you have the Umayyad Caliphate, which conquers pretty much the entirety of North Africa and Spain. They're followed by the Abbasids. I would take away from them that their conquest leads to a rapid spread of Islam and a increase and kind of exponential growth of trade because of Islam's support of merchants. The Abbasids last a long time, so that's important to know. The Abbasid caliphs last until 1250 something. No, Yeah, something like that. When the last Abbasid caliph is killed. Y'all can look up that date though. The Mongols end the Abbasid Caliphate for good. Of course, the spread of Islam, the importance of trade, the emphasis of the Umayyads and Abbasids on learning. That's, I think, something that's extremely important. Thinking about Baghdad as this very important city for the preservation of knowledge. That's certainly going to be important to Europe as they come back into contact with some of those ideas after the Crusades. So that would be the big things with that. Does our knowledge of labor systems need to go beyond serfdom? Yes, I would say, J. Grandmaster, that your knowledge of labor systems does need to go beyond that. Of course, slavery would be an example of this. Also, corvée labor, or labor as a tax, would be important to know. We see that in China. We see it with the building of the Grand Canal under the Sui Dynasty. We see slavery in the slave trade between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. We see slavery across the Islamic empires, although at times that becomes like a way that Islam spreads, is because it's against Islam for one Muslim to have another Muslim as a slave. So oftentimes people would convert to Islam and gain their freedom. Other systems, the MITA system of South America, I think that would be important to know. MIT''A is how you spell that. Oh, this pen doesn't even work. Oh, it sort of does. This is the MITA system. So those would be your starters, I would say, for labor systems in this time period. Let's see if I can find anything else to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, serfdom, Europe and Japan, MITA system in the Inca. Yeah, that's about it. There's a demand for slaves in Central Eurasia, parts of Africa, Eastern Mediterranean. Pretty much it. Oh, occasionally peasants do revolt in areas like China and the Byzantine Empire. That's in the key concepts, but I think you've had some reading on that in your book. All right. Do we need to know about the nomads that were putting pressure on the Song Empire? Yes, sort of. Your book goes into more detail about specific nomadic groups. I'm more concerned just knowing that, concerned with you knowing that nomadic groups put pressure on them. Your book goes into detail about like which nomadic groups, et cetera, and there's like a lot of jostling around and fighting back and forth between them. But just know that nomadic groups, that puts certainly a financial strain on Song Dynasty China, and it eventually kind of forced the Song Dynasty China to move further south. The Mongols then move in. All right, I'm working my way through these questions, guys. Give me a second to find out where we are. Hannah, can you please elaborate on coerced labor and where it is found? Okay, coerced labor is any type of labor that is just not freely done for like a wage. So slavery is one form of coerced labor. Serfdom would be another, because serfs were not allowed to leave their land. So that would be found in a place like Europe or Japan. The slavery, well, I already said slavery, found mainly in Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, Central Asia. And then corvée labor, which will come in a little bit later. We'll see that certainly in China and some other places, and the MITA system in South America. That's what I would say for that one. Yes, Aiden, that was the Mita system in the Inca Empire. Layla, what are the most important things to know about each Khanate? I would say know where they are. First of all, so if you're talking about like Kublai Khan's Khanate, the Yuan dynasty of China, kind of know where that is. The Ilkhanate's found in the Middle East. The Golden Horde is found in Russia, and they exact tribute from the Russian princes there before eventually being forced out. I had a video that I put in the PLP on the Khanates, and that is kind of the bare bones stuff that you need to know about each. It was a video from last school year. I would advise you to kind of look that over for what to know specifically about each Khanate. But you don't have to know exactly like which Mongol was the leader of which Khanate. The biggest importance-wise cities in the Hanseatic League. Okay, so Novgorod would be, I think, the most important to know there. The key concepts have a list of cities that rise in this time period, and I believe Novgorod is the only big one that's found in the Hanseatic League. I'm going to double check right now. Yeah, Novgorod would be the most important of that. And if you're wondering what word I'm saying, it's spelled like this. It's found in Russia. For a while, there is, I think that's forwards. It's backwards on my screen, but it's probably forwards for you. Novgorod is for a while the most important city in Russia after Kiev is basically like conquered by the Vikings, because the princes, first of all, Novgorod's tough to get to and tough to conquer, and the princes there kind of work with the Mongols. It will remain the most important city in Russia until Moscow becomes the most important city in Russia at the end of this time period. And if you watched Jeopardy last night, they had a question on it. So I hope you did. It's Teen Jeopardy. I think y'all kicked their butts. Those teens did not seem as smart as y'all. Thanks, very helpful to get, okay, good. What were the effects of the Polynesian migrations? So there were kind of two effects that I really quickly went over yesterday at the end of class on the Polynesian migrations. Let me see if I can find my specifics on the notes for that before I answer that question. While y'all are waiting on me to find that, how was class today? Everybody good on the name 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing? If you weren't here when we started, my tooth is fine. They drilled a lot of it though, like a lot of my tooth. And he said it was a very small filling, but it did not feel that way. Let's see. All right. Well, I have no idea really what I do with my notes on this. So, Polynesian migrations. Okay, so Polynesian migrations, big effects. One, linguistic effects, I think, would be significant in this time period. Two, sailing technologies, the spread of flora and fauna along with them are just plants that moved along with the Polynesians. Animals were spread, and that had significant environmental consequence. For example, Polynesians took pigs with them from island to island, and they brought them to Hawaii. And pigs in Hawaii destroyed most of the indigenous plants and kind of cost some of the animals their natural habitats. In some cases, the Polynesian peoples over harvested trees on islands, which could have led to the collapse of the Easter Island civilization, actually, kind of cutting down of trees and causing like soil erosion and then lack of resources. So they definitely kind of see a big interaction with the environment. In language-wise, though, there was kind of a base Polynesian language which spreads throughout kind of the Polynesian triangle of the Pacific Ocean. And like kind of the Bantu languages and Swahili, it spreads throughout the Pacific. So you have kind of a similar base of those languages that that spreads. I think AP Worldopedia has a little bit more information on that. So I would encourage you to go take a look at key concept 3.1 on AP Worldopedia. All right, moving on. I'm way behind your questions, so just give me a moment. If we could pause the questions until I catch up. I'll try not to go into quite so much detail. Can we talk about Japan and why it was significant? Yeah, so Japan is well, it's significant in a lot of different ways. Next unit, I'll go back and do a little bit more information on Japan, more like governmental changes. I gave you a reading on Japan with the signification of Japan. So we will see Japan kind of play a major role kind of later on in this course because they're still pretty isolated, but they are trading. They do develop a feudal system in Japan, and it's very much a decentralized government at this time. We basically, with this feudal system, you have like a shogun, but you don't have it's basically like warlords in charge of different regions. We spend a lot more time on Japan in the next unit, I would say, more so than this one, the next 2 units really. So I don't think I have too much on Japan. If you see something on them, about them on the test, most likely it will be like comparing their system to Europe or talking about like Chinese influence in Japan. Just remember, as far as the signification of Japan that you read about, the Taika reforms are the reforms that wanted to make Japan govern more like China, and China is, from the video, right? China was a government that governed more because of some involvement of people with the emperor. There's kind of a backlash against that. There's kind of a reaction that keeps China from really enacting all of the, or keeps Japan, excuse me, from enacting all of these reforms to make it more like China. Let's see what else we have on here. So there's a question on here. Is the META system basically the corvée system? So yeah, you can think of it that way. The META is a very specific type of corvée labor. Corvée labor is just unpaid, unfree labor. Usually it's for like certain periods of time, like a certain number of days of work each year that you might owe the government, for example. And the META was mandatory public service in the Inca Empire. So yeah, basically same stuff. Armadillo, I like that name. How is the Indian Ocean trade route most important? Oh man, that's a big question. So the Indian Ocean trade route is the biggest and trade route in this time period by volume, hands down. I think we spent more time probably talking about Silk Road because the Silk Road is like this, great thing that we talk about in history. But the Indian Ocean connected a lot of people in this time. It connected China and Southeast Asia and South Asia and Arabia and East Africa at rates never seen before. The development of dhow ships and junk ships are going to allow people to trade more stuff further and wider than ever before. And with that trade of goods are also the trade of ideas and culture. And that's, I think, one of the most significant things that you can learn in this course is that that wherever goods are traded, those ideas come behind them. And so you end up with the development of very cosmopolitan cities all around basically the rim of the Indian Ocean. Cities like Malacca, cities on the Swahili coast of East Africa. So that's on the Malabar coast of India. That is extremely significant. That is, we see religion spreading, we see culture spreading, we see interaction of cultures. And especially in this time period, because you don't have one single group dominating the Indian Ocean trade. It's just too vast, it's too big. Until the Europeans come in our next time period, there will not be one group just dominating this region. And so it kind of really makes for a very interesting cultural region of the world, even to this day, I would say. What caused urban areas to revive and decline? Okay, big question, good question there. So the decline of urban areas is really seen at the start of this time period, and that's because empires had declined. We see people kind of abandon cities, especially in Europe, for like feudal, towns and villages or manors or what have you. For a number of reasons, it takes a while for these cities to recover. But the decline comes in just people kind of moving away, a decline in trade in general. When empires decline, trade declines as well. And cities are pretty much just hubs for trade to take place. So I think that is kind of important to realize. The other factors that brought about the decline of cities included invasion. If you're looking at Europe, for example, you're talking about the Viking invasion. Well, before the Vikings, even at the end of last time period, we had Germanic invasions and the Hun migrations that caused those. During the Middle Ages, you had the Viking invasions. Disease caused the decline of cities. That's one thing that we see in this time period at the start, whether it be smallpox especially, causing the decline of cities. And then just generally the decline in agricultural productivity. With the decline of empires, you don't really see the same innovations being made in agriculture. And it's not until really we get close to the High Middle Age, or we get to the High Middle Ages in Europe, that Europe starts to pull out of it with the three-field system and things like the horse collar and putting wheels on plows and crap like that, stuff like that. So those, I would say, if you had to make a list: invasions, disease, decline of agricultural production. That's why cities mainly decline, and decline of trade. Of course, chicken and egg situation there. Do cities decline and then trade declines? There's trade decline, which leads people to leave cities. Now, as far as urban revival, it's pretty much just the opposite of those things. The end of invasions, the development of safer and more reliable transport, and those can be innovations in transport, and it can also be governments protecting people moving from place to place. The rise of commerce, so an increase in trade, whether it be the Hanseatic League of Northern Europe, whether it be the Italian city-states, whether it be trade across the Islamic empires, or trade along the Silk Road, or trade in the Pax Mongolica, or trade in the Indian Ocean, cities will pop up where commerce develops. And then, of course, in Europe, we see an uptick in temperature starting around the year 800. So those warmer temperatures lead to increased agricultural production, which in turn will lead to a rise in population. If you have more people, you have more available labor, and those people usually go to cities to find work. I hope I answered your question there with that one. So, rise and fall of cities, or the decline and revival of cities, kind of in that order. Leo asks, what are the important dates that we need to know? Okay, off the top of my head, the year 600 is our starting point in this time period. So what's going on around 600? The rise of Islam. You don't have to know every date associated with the rise of Islam, but they're fairly easy to remember, or at least to me. 570, Muhammad is born. 610, his first revelation. 622, he's kicked out of Mecca and goes to Medina. The year 622 is probably most important of those. That's the beginning of the Muslim calendar. He dies in 632. So there's some general dates there. The Battle of Tours, I would say, is another one that you should know. That is the year 732. The Battle of Tours takes place. Major turning point in history. That could be a really good short answer or LEQ question on turning points. You know, in what sense that's a turning point? Because Islam is spreading, and then all of a sudden it stopped in its tracks. The Battle of Talas, which is between the Abbasids and the Tang Dynasty of China, is also a date that you may want to know. It's 751 is the date for that. I don't think you have to know that one, but that's just one that stands out to me. Going through chronologically, I would say the year 800, Charlemagne crowned Holy Roman Emperor. 1054, you have the schism between the Western Christian Church and the Eastern Christian Church. That's basically when the Pope says, you know, listen to me, I'm the Pope. And the Patriarch of Constantinople says, nope, we won't. And there's some other theological differences that cause that split. But it is probably an important one. Other dates. The Magna Carta is signed in like 1215. You probably there's some reading in your book about that. I really hadn't talked about that at all. That's just a general date to know in all of world history, I think. The kind of know generally when the Mongols are around, late 1200s, early 1300s. And then at the end of this time period, 1450 is our end date. But just outside of this time period, kind of goes with that turning point of 1450, is the year 1453, which is the fall of Constantinople. I think those are the big dates, at least off the top of my head. Oh, and 1095, the call to the First Crusade by Pope Urban II. All right, I think that's it, though. Okay. Which key concept is most heavily tested on this test, or is it evenly distributed? I would say that on this test, key concepts 3.1 and 3.2 are more heavily tested. 3.3 is a little bit shorter, so you're just not going to see as many questions about that. It's basically the fact that economic productivity is increasing, and then there are consequences to that. So a lot of interaction with the environment, basically, and social structures. So patriarchy, you know, how we just in general as humans like to destroy our environment to grow food, and then we get mad when food doesn't grow anymore. Those would be the big things. So key concept 3.3 is probably tested a lot less. 3.1, 3.2, trade and state building. Those are what you can see most heavily on the test, Kirby. Halima, what should we know in terms of the Renaissance? Causes and effects of the Renaissance. That's what I would say. Causes of the Renaissance, revival of cities in Europe, growth in population, revival of trade between Europe and the Middle East. We had a whole list of videos last year on that. I would take a look back. If you go to mine or Mr. Guilford's page, I think Mr. Guilford may have done the cause of the Renaissance. Results of the Renaissance, of course, include, you know, a change in art and culture in Europe, a renewed interest in those things, a renewed interest in trade and luxury goods coming from the East, and the like, I would say. But mostly causes and effects. I think you probably have a good idea of what the Renaissance is. So focusing on, what brings it about and what its effects are, and the role of like Italian city-states in that. Let's see. Oh, let's see. I skipped ahead. Give me a second. Ooh, could you make the paper double spaced next time? I'm guessing that is in response to the name 54321 assignment. And yeah, maybe. We'll see. I mean, right on the back. It's also electronic online, so if you just want to like work on it electronically, always feel free to do that. I just give it to you on paper because I figure it's a quick jot note down assignment. If there's something like you're really confused on, you can't come up with stuff, I would say just highlight it and go look it up. Is there something important to know about the Songhai Empire? Let me see if I have anything kind of more pressing or specific about that empire that is really that you should know. I will kind of cover the big empires in China next unit because I really didn't do a good job this unit. So to give some context to those empires, I will need to look at it. If I recall, I'm looking at the dates exactly. The Songhai Empire, Songhai, it's really dominant in the 15th and 16th centuries. So we'll talk about it a little bit more in the next unit. But the Ghana and Mali empires, which preceded in West Africa, are pretty important, I would say. So if you need to, just kind of take a look back in your reading. They do pop up every once in a while. West African kingdoms, really important to trade across the Sahara Desert, I would say. The Mali Empire, probably the most important in this time period in West Africa, though, because of its position as a major trading empire across the Sahara. Cities like Timbuktu are kind of make it that much more important. The Mali Empire itself, I'll just give you a little bit more information on it. It was founded by a guy named Sundiata. It really becomes known kind of throughout the Muslim world when Mansa Musa goes on his Hajj to Mecca. That can be seen as a major turning point in history too, or at least a turning point in in trade in the Trans-Saharan network. Mansa Musa visits Mecca. Along the way, he carries like a huge caravan. He's got like 100 camels with him, thousands of slaves and soldiers go with him, and he just brings like tons of gold to like give out to people along the way. That's pretty much it. About 100 years after Mansa Musa dies, the empire goes into decline and it's replaced by the Songhai Empire. Yeah. Oh, and it's also responsible. It's also important for the spread of Islam in West Africa. So that would be it. Trade and in Islam. I lost my questions. How well do we need to know African and Indian Ocean cities? Which ones? Okay, so as far as which ones you need to know, Timbuktu, certainly. Your book gives, or not your book, excuse me, the Key Concepts gives basically a list of cities to know in them. And I will run down the list right now because I don't know if I can share my screen. Oh, here we go. I wonder if this will work. So if it is on this list, feel free to screenshot. To share this window. Okay, I hope you can see that. So here's the list of trading cities that you should know: Novgorod in Russia, Timbuktu in West Africa, the Swahili city-states just in general. I guess there's not really like a specific one that I would have you know. Um, just trying to see if I can find specific ones. Kilwo, I mean, is one of them, which is one of the ones you had to know on your map test. Mogadishu, which is like currently, it's still a city in the country of Somalia. Zanzibar was another city in East Africa. Other than that, Hangzhou, Calicut, Baghdad, Malacca, Venice, Tenochtitlan, Kokia, those are the cities that you probably should at least recognize in this unit. All right, 5 seconds more to screenshot this. I'm back. Can you explain the Bantu migrations? Yes, that was like the last thing. I kind of had to rush through it the other day in class. Basically, over a period of about 2,000 years, there are migrations that occur in Africa from kind of like just like around the bight of Africa. And these Bantu-speaking peoples start a migration spreading outward. And it probably resulted from climate change. They were on the southern edge of the Sahara Desert. As the Sahara Desert kind of spread more and more, they were forced to migrate to other regions. In migrating, they spread a couple things. They spread, well, one, the Bantu language, which develops into Swahili languages. They spread iron-making technology. They spread agriculture with them. And there's some other things they spread with them, like, for example, disease spreads as they move. Malaria was very common in West Africa, and it kind of spreads throughout sub-Saharan Africa as they move from place to place. They spread kind of traditional religion with them. They spread traditional art with them as they spread throughout sub-Saharan Africa. I think that's everything, I would say, with them. I mean, it's not everything, but it's everything that I think you need to know for this course. Oh, I lost my place again. Importance of Timbuktu, trading city in, so the question is, what should we know regarding the importance of Timbuktu? Important city in the Mali Empire, trading city, very important for trade from West Africa to North Africa across the Trans-Saharan network. And keep in mind that the Trans-Saharan network was all about salt coming from North Africa south, and then slaves, gold, ivory, north. Did the Mongols just adopt cultures and technology in different conquered regions, or they develop their own technologies? Oh, that's a good question, Ashwin. So they had developed their own technologies. You know, they had their own cultural development. It's tough to say that those developments were just Mongol, because there are a lot of Central Asian nomadic groups. So I can't really speak to it that closely. But they had kind of their own distinct culture and their own specific developments for the pastoral nomadic way of life. However, they were known for adopting especially military technology from people that they conquered, I lost my train of thought. But yes, they did adopt from other people, but it was not solely like stealing other people's culture. I wish I could speak more intelligently about that. That's just like the extent of my knowledge on that. So, why does the battle between the Song Dynasty and Abbasids sound out? Well, so the first thing I'd say is it's the Abbasids do not battle the Song Dynasty. They battle the Tang Dynasty of China. And basically both are just expanding their empires down through the Silk Road. And they end up just meeting at this battle in Central Asia, basically, where they're kind of competing for influence in this region. It's to take over this trading region. The Abbasids end up kind of winning in this battle, and so they gain control of this Central Asian region at the Talas River. And I would say the most significant effect of this is that it stopped, because they come into contact with each other, they kind of stop the spread. Like Islam stopped spreading west, China and Buddhism stopped, or Islam and the Abbasids stopped spreading east, China and Buddhism kind of stopped spreading west. But one significant cultural effect of it was that Islam will kind of take hold in that region of Central Asia, beginning in this time, really. And basically, we're talking about a region like northwest of India, kind of northwest of the Hindu Kush Mountains, like in the region of like Afghanistan, and I forget what other countries are there. So that's one significant thing with that battle. The other thing is that there is an exchange of culture between these two groups. There are a lot of ethnic groups. The trade will kind of continue between these two groups for a long time. So there's like different ethnic groups that come to China as a result of this. Chang'an will become like extremely cosmopolitan during this time period, as kind of these groups start to interact more with each other. Paper making technology from China spreads to the Middle East. I think that's pretty significant as a result of this battle, or partially as a result of that battle. So I would say that's just why we see it as kind of an important event, the Battle of Talas, that is. Causes of the fall of the Song Dynasty. Okay. Well, first of all, I would say like defending the borders became very expensive. The Song Dynasty ends up collapsing. I said the Song Dynasty, right? I may have said Tang, but the Song Dynasty ends up collapsing because of these people pushing on the borders. Eventually, the Mongols just conquer them. It's pretty much the threats from nomads that cause us to go from the northern Song Dynasty period to the southern Song Dynasty period. And the thing that really separates them is simply like the movement of the capital from Chang'an southward. You know, that's what I would say are the big things. I mean, just conquest. They just lost out to powerful nomadic groups. What about kings in Europe to centralize their kingdoms near the end of this time period? Were you in our class last year? Yes, of course you were. A lot of things. So in terms of like centralization, there's a lot of stuff going on in Europe in this time period and into next. Part of it has to do with the rise of standing armies kind of at the beginning of when the Crusades start. Normal peasant people start to go on crusade. And this kind of gives kings the idea that, well, while my nobles are off on crusade too, why don't I just raise a standing army? Why am I relying on these like aristocrats to defend this territory when I could just have an army that would listen to me at any time? That's going to be one thing that allows them to consolidate power. As you know, people go on crusade and people die. Certain people are gobbling up land in Europe. I think that's one thing that we see. And I think it's just kind of a general ebb and flow. I mean, it's that question is kind of like, well, why does China end up, moving from fragmentation to centralization? A lot of it depends on kind of what's going on, who's in charge of money, where you're getting your taxes from, and if you get more money, then it allows you to centralize even more. I think kind of those are the big answers, I would say. I was going to see if I had any like a list of things. I don't think I do really in terms of centralization. Oh, the church losing its power. The Catholic Church will begin to kind of lose control over individual leaders. I think that's something that helps people centralize in Europe. Yeah, so I would say those things, you know, people becoming richer, taking over more land. We'll talk, I guess, a little bit more about it in the next unit with the kind of the rise of absolute monarchies as a result of like getting really rich from trade with the rest of the world. But I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't go that much detail, I guess, about the reemergence of powerful European kings until much later. Let's see. Next question. Is Srivijaya really important to know? It's not in the key concepts. Okay. So Srivijaya it's not, I guess, something that is found in the key concepts, but it's more of illustrating an idea. And that is that kind of along these trade networks, especially, for example, the Indian Ocean, there is the spread of religion with the spread of trade. And so Srivijaya was an important kingdom for the diffusion of Buddhism across the region. This was a Buddhist kingdom, and because of where it was located and its control over trade through the Straits of Malacca, it was, you know, significant for also spreading the religion in that region. So I don't think it's maybe something that you have to know, like, oh, I need to know everything about that kingdom. Certainly not. But what I would say is understand what it represents, the spread of religion along with the spread of trade in the Indian Ocean. And it just happened to be the, you know, an important kingdom at the Straits of Malacca. How did the Polynesian Chinese dynasties interact with each other, if at all? I can't think of anything off the top of my head that we would see other than just generic trade. The Ming Dynasty sends out a guy named Zheng Ha to across kind of the Southeast Asia and into the Indian Ocean, looking to exact tribute from peoples in the region. So although I can't say, you know, 100%, I can't remember exactly what groups he interacts with. Take a look at your book on that. My book's over there, so I'm not going to bother getting up. There's definitely a possibility of them interacting there. Trade with spices certainly could be some of those interactions, but I can't really come up with any really concrete examples out of my head, so I apologize for that one, Trey. How long will this be? This will go on as long as you have questions, well, at least for maybe 10 more minutes, I guess till 9 o'clock. That's how long I intended today. But if you have to go somewhere, feel free to close. I will not make you feel bad about it. I meant elaborate. Aiden, I don't know which part you wanted me to elaborate on. If it was kings centralizing, then I hope I've elaborated enough. Ashwin, for the Bantu people, did the advancement of iron making lead to the advancement of agriculture techniques and tools? Yes, yes, we do see iron making tools being used in agriculture, and so that enables them to farm better. Here we go. What is important to know about Kievan Rus? Everything, I would say. Okay, Kievan Rus, big things to know just off the top of my head, although I would encourage you to go back and look at the reading that is in the PLP if you want a refresher on it. Kievan Rus, established by Viking peoples, established around the city of Kiev, important for trade around the Dnieper River, engaged in trade with the Byzantine Empire, eventually converts to Eastern Orthodox Christianity because of its interaction with the Byzantine Empire, and controlled a lot of like the fur trade coming from Russia. Precursor to modern Russia, I would say. What is important to note about Christianity during this time period? Major schisms? Yes. So Christianity is still spreading at the start of this time period. So it's not like the year 600 and magically Christianity is everywhere. Of course, it still hasn't spread to the Americas. That's clear. But it's still spreading through Europe. So there's still going to be kind of Christian pockets all around the Mediterranean. Even with the spread of Islam, we will see kind of Christian merchants and stuff still in Eastern Mediterranean. Still along the Silk Road, you have some Christians still there. But it is spreading through Northern Europe. I mean, Christianity really doesn't reach places like Denmark and Scandinavia until around the year 900 to 1000, sometimes some even a little bit later than that, 1100. So Christianity is still spreading in this time period. I think that's something that is important to know. Though by the year about 1450, it has spread throughout all of Europe, and it's getting ready to split into many different Protestant faiths at the start of our next time period. Other things to know about Christianity. There is a hierarchy within the Catholic Church in this time period. The Catholic Church is the largest landholder in Europe throughout the feudal era. There are, of course, that political. So there's kind of this like church hierarchy and the political hierarchy, and they sometimes come into conflict with each other. We saw that with the investiture crisis, which you can go look up in your book if you don't remember what that is. The murder of Thomas Becket in Britain that I talked about in class. You can go look at your notes if you need to know what that is. So there's still kind of a lot of power struggle going on in Europe between political and religious aspects. Christianity is responsible for the Pope is responsible for calling the Crusades, which sends Europe to war with the caliphates of the Middle East. I think that's pretty significant. The church also is a patron for arts pretty much throughout this entire period, so it's extremely important for understanding European culture. Even as Europe was divided and feudal, there was this Roman Catholic Christianity which served as cultural unification in a period of fragmentation. Those are things off the top of my head that I would say about Christianity. Oh, and yeah, there are schisms that take place. The most noteworthy being, of course, the split between the Eastern and Western Catholic Church, and then also the Great Schism that occurs when there's a pope in Avignon, France. Take a look at your book for that one. Let's see what else we have next. I have to find my. Is Yuan Zhang the same as Zhong Ha or something like that? No. So there's a couple of these. Zhuan Zhang is a Chinese monk, somewhere in here, I'll get this right, that travels and his stories are recorded. Zhong Ha, spelled like this, is a basically like an admiral in the Ming Dynasty Navy, and he goes around with looking for like tribute and bringing stuff back to the Ming Emperor, like gigantic giraffes and things like that. But also looking for, he goes around with this massive fleet of junk ships, kind of this treasure fleet it's called, and is looking to, one, expand Chinese influence in Southeast Asia and in the Indian Ocean, and also to basically force people to pay tribute to China as they try to kind of take over trade in this region. If the Ming Dynasty had not kind of recalled Zheng Ha and their merchant and their traders, China probably still would have been a major force in the Indian Ocean and perhaps may have come to dominate Indian Ocean trade. Instead, they kind of shrink back and they stop engaging in trade with the rest of the Indian Ocean just as the Portuguese are coming in. And the Portuguese come in and they take it over. It's kind of interesting to play what if in history. Like, what if the Ming Dynasty had come to dominate trade in the Indian Ocean and the Portuguese had come in? What would the interaction have been like? How would that have impacted the future of the world, or at least of the Indian Ocean basin? The world may never know. Airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow. 40 miles an hour, maybe? I don't know. Big comparisons between Tang and Song China. Oh, gosh. I didn't give you a chart on this. Let me see if I have one here. Didn't you do a chart on that? Somebody fill me in. I thought that was like the idea. That was a whole lesson we did, right? You had a reading on the two and asked you to compare them. Take a look at that. That's what I would say. Airspeed velocity is kind of redundant. You're right, Ashwin, I guess. I don't know what African or European means. Oh, of the unladen swallow. Okay, I get it. Lots of good Monty Python jokes going on here. I'm laughing on the inside. Can you please explain the main Mongol Empire and the emperors and the Khanates they ruled? So Mongol emperors or great khans wants to know Genghis Khan. I would know him for the test. I think he's followed by Ogadei Khan, and then Kuyuk Khan, I think, may follow him. But really, other than Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan would be the other big one to know in this. I don't foresee any reason why you might see a name on the test of one of those khans without getting context. If it is not mentioned expressly in the key concepts, usually you are given some type of context to tell you who that person is and fit them into kind of your narrative. So I wouldn't worry too much about that on the AP exam or even on this test. As far as kind of what the Khanates have a general idea of where they ruled: Golden Horde, Russia, Yuan, China, Ilkhanate, Southwest Asia or the Middle East, the Chagatai Khanate, which is sometimes spelled with a CH, sometimes with a J. That's basically Central Asia. That's going to come into play because they're going to form kind of the basis of the Mughal Empire eventually. Do we need to know a lot about the different Khanates? Okay, a lot of people are concerned about the Khanates. I would say just look over the notes that I gave you, look over the video I posted to the PLP. Why did the Ming withdraw from trade? Good question. Mainly, they just did not think that it was worthwhile. They were spending a lot of money sending people out on these treasure ships. You know, you're talking about like tons of ships with a lot of people on them who are getting paid. They would travel with like support ships in the hundreds. And so it was an a major expense for the Ming Dynasty. These treasure ships. I wanted to see if I could find a specific page in this book that would give me a little bit more information there. I know there's one thing I want, but basically they were looking for tribute from countries and they were not getting back what they needed to continue these trips. We'll talk more about that in the next unit for sure. Because the Ming Dynasty is primarily in Unit 4, although Zheng Ha is in Unit 3, which is why we deal with them then. Let's see if I can find some more info on it. I know this is riveting. You're sitting on the edge of your seat right now. Let's see. Um, yeah, I would say that's just the basic answer to that question is it just was not financially beneficial to continue that trade. So that's why they withdraw from it. That does not mean that they're not trading at all. They just are not trying to dominate trade in Southeast Asia. For a time, the Ming Dynasty is very good in controlling piracy, and then when they stop trading, piracy runs rampant again. Just a side note on pirates, if you were wondering. I don't know why we're shaking our head at Alex. Oh, because of the worksheet. Okay. Sorry, I'm catching up to your questions, guys. Sorry. We did a chart. Yeah, finally. I know, right? I was afraid he didn't get it. Context. Ah, context. Conjuncts. Can you tell us more about the conates? Oh my gosh, I've talked enough about them. Concentrate. Okay, lots of con jokes. I think that means that we are getting close to finished. What was feudal Japan like, and how did it end up that way? Okay. Well, feudal Japan was in a lot of ways similar to feudal Europe. It was fragmented. Japan is a large island. It's roughly the size of California. So we're not talking about a small area. It's not like, you know, the island of like Puerto Rico or something that we would think about as an island in the United States, but it's fairly large. It's also mountainous. It's kind of geographically, it's pretty diverse. And so that makes it pretty difficult to control any region when you have difficult terrain. As far as like how did it end up feudal, basically just powerful aristocrats. A good job of centralizing power. They attempt to at times, especially with the Taika reforms, but they don't work. I mean, there's basically just powerful families, you know, pulling the strings in China, and so basically with the aristocracy just being too powerful, the central empire or the centralized government of China kind of breaks apart. So basically you just get these kind of like feudal kingdoms that arise. I'm trying to find some information. Landowning aristocrats we call daimyo. They're like the nobles, the nobility. Let's see, peasants were serfs, just like in Europe. The code of honor in Japan was not, so there was a code of honor in kind of both among knights in Japan and the samurai knights in Europe and the samurai of Japan. The knights in Europe had this chivalric code. The Bushido code was found in Japan. So just a lot of similarities there in social structure. And I think it's just a social hierarchy that we've seen develop kind of naturally in different regions of the world because it seems to be a way to establish organization in a fragmented society. If you have a fragmented place with decentralized government, the easiest way, there's going to be a lot of people who need protection. And so those people are going to turn to rich, powerful people for protection. Those rich, powerful people are going to set up a structure that benefits them, but also rewards loyalty. And so feudalism developed. Let's see. What do we know about Zhuangzhang, Marco Polo, and Ibn Battuta? So they were travelers. Ibn Battuta was a Muslim traveler. Zhuangzhang was a Chinese traveler. Marco Polo was a European traveler. And they traveled to places outside of their homelands and write about them. So they're significant in that in their travels, we gain a lot of insight into the inner workings of, say, the Yuan dynasty in China, if you're talking about the writings of Marco Polo, or what Islam looked like around really kind of the world, I guess, for the extent of Islam all the way from Africa to throughout the Indian Ocean and into Central Asia, and Batuta traveled to. So we have a lot of writings about those, and those writings, the key concepts, I think, well, I'm pulling it up here, the exact phrasing is their writings illustrate both the extent and the limitation of intercultural knowledge and understanding. So something I think that's referring to is that these different regions of the world, these travelers, they were interacting with each other. Europeans were learning about the Chinese. The Ibn Battuta from Morocco was learning about what Islam looked like across the Indian Ocean and in East Africa. Zhuang Zhang, who was from China, was finding out how the world was operating in Central Asia. So these different regions around the world were interacting with each other and did kind of have an idea. It wasn't like people in Europe knew nothing about, didn't know the existence of China, although I'm sure that some did not know the existence of China at the time. But there's also a limitation to this. They were, blinded by their own biases oftentimes. You saw that with the writings of Ibn Battuta. They oftentimes didn't understand the culture of these different places that they were traveling to. And sometimes they just had flat out like untruths or just guesses that turn out not to be true. So all those things are kind of shown by these different people who traveled and wrote about it. Okay, I'm going to cut off questions now. So the last one is Halima's question there. Concentrate 9 and 5, I concur. What do we find the key concepts again? You can find them linked in the PLP. I think they are linked either under our first assignment of like previewing the unit or in your project resources, or you can look them up online. Oh, what do I mean when I say Pope Innocent IV versus Kuyuk Khan letters in the study guide? So this is something that I think I can't remember if we read with y'all last year, and I had my AP class take a look at it. There is these really like fascinating letters that that basically when Christianity and the Mongols come head to head, the Mongols are like bearing down on Europe, and there are these letters back and forth. Basically, the Pope writes to the Mongols and says like, hey, stop killing Christians in your conquest. And you know what? While you're at it, you need to convert to Christianity and repent for your sins and bow down to me, the Pope, because it's the right thing to do and you don't want to burn in hell for all eternity. In response, the Mongols write back to the Pope, if your God is so powerful, how come we're conquering the world? In fact, Pope, don't send your envoy to us. You yourself come and bow down to me. And so basically there's these letters being written back and forth, which kind of show the opposing cultures, opposing religions. I think the Europeans saw this as kind of a religious opportunity, and the Mongols just saw it as, heaven has ordained that we conquer this land. It was told to Genghis Khan, and we're continuing to conquer it. Basically, Western Europe Europe is on the verge of being conquered by the Mongols. I mean, they are on the doorstep. And then the Great Khan dies. So the Mongols literally return to vote on the next Khan of Khans, and they never get back to conquering Europe again. They simply lose interest. Jay Grandmaster, what do we know about the Toltec? They are a precursor culture that eventually develops into kind of Mesoamerican Aztec culture. That would be the main stuff. If you want, there's a short reading that you used for your group presentations. You can go there. It's like one section on the Toltec. It's all you'll need to know. All right. Should you like and subscribe for more content? Yeah, like and subscribe below. Sure. All right, guys. It is 9:10, which means we've gone for about an hour and a half, and I am tired, and I have more work to do because I am, yeah, I got more stuff to do. You have to study tonight. I will be at school about 8:15 in the morning to conduct your early morning cram session. It'll be like this. You come and ask questions, and I will answer them. So that's it. Hey, what's up, guys? Y'all are crazy. All right, guys. Adios. Oh, answers are either A, B, C, or D. Bye.